So firstly, why do we do this? Well, let me just share with you what we do. So Generation E, we run electric vehicle road trips and we run these summits, and we experience a lot of people test driving electric vehicles, and we see what we call the wow factor, which is where people basically get into an electric car and they try it for the first time and they're like, wow, paradigm shift, this is a new world, this is incredible. And we've experienced it. I think you've probably experienced it in an electric car.
I have indeed. I was lucky enough to drive a Jaguar for a week, an I-Pace. They lent it to me for a week, and an exhilarating car. I've been inside a Tesla. I've driven the Mienie. So a different world.
Fantastic, yeah. So that wow factor, we see it. You've seen it. If you haven't already had that wow factor, check out some of the AutoTrader electric car reviews, or go and get a test drive as soon as possible. Then you know what we're talking about. Anyway, we preach the belief that we have, which is that there's a trajectory towards electric vehicles. We really believe in the next few years, electric is what everyone will be buying. We really believe that. But we can't just tell you we believe that because we've seen the wow factor, although that does play a role. We know that we need data. We need to understand what's happening on the ground, what's happening from the end user's perspective. So I think Timo, if you can just start sharing this presentation, that would be great. So we need to understand what's happening. We need the hard data. And so therefore, we got to do some surveying. We got to ask the people, what do you think? What are your perceptions and expectations when it comes to electric vehicles? So we've done a similar survey in the Middle East, which has worked very well. And so when we looked at South Africa, and we thought, let's do this, the obvious choice for us was AutoTrader. And I'll tell you why, for a few reasons. You have a huge amount of car purchase buying sort of ready customers, so people that are actively about to buy a car.
Yeah, I mean, our term for those are in-market car shoppers, so they're in the market to buy a car. And 45 million searches, 46 million searches got conducted in September, so we think we're representative of the car buying public.
And that's really important, because obviously we could have stood outside, a metro station, asking people what they thought of electric vehicles. But if they're not actively ready to buy a car, if they're not in market car shoppers, then in a way their opinion isn't as powerful, because we need to know what are car buyers thinking about these cars. And what they're thinking about the cars basically tells us what's going to happen today, tomorrow, and over the next few years. So that's why AutoTrader is such a key partner, and we're so happy to be working with you on this survey. You obviously have a lot of visits to your website, and then not only have we conducted the survey with you guys, but you already have insights from where people are coming to your website, and you know that you can see which pages they're going on and what they're searching for. And obviously, if you see a spike in the search for BMW i3 or electric car, then that is going to give the market the most real insights into what end users are actually perceiving.
An anecdotal example of that, Ben, is over the last couple of months since pre-lockdown, we've seen a spike in search for armored vehicles. So,
Wow.
So we see all of that data that you just referred to.
Interesting. Hopefully armored EVs.
Well, yeah, armored EVs in the future, I guess.
So George, let's dive in. What have we got to look forward to?
Yeah, so Ben, we did the survey across a couple of buckets, if you want to call it. The first bucket is penetration. What penetration does exists for EVs in South Africa? The next bucket was perception. How do consumers perceive EVs? And then the next bucket is expectation. What do consumers expect from an EV in order to make the buying decision or the purchasing decision? And then the purchase intent. How long is it going to take for consumers of different demographics before they buy an EV? And then finally, the fifth one is awareness and trust. Which is quite an important one, and stick around to the end, because we reveal how aware consumers are of what EVs are available in the market. But not only that, who do they trust from a manufacturer point of view in manufacturing an EV? And for us, these are the 5 buckets, and we'll get straight into it.
Very interesting. So I think first and foremost, we need to know how many people in South Africa have already driven an electric vehicle.
Well, it turns out, Ben, that there we go. It turns out that consumers that have owned an EV makes up about 1.8% of the market who have
Quite
ever
low there.
owned an EV. But I think the interesting part is that 68% of people want to own an EV, with about 13% having driven an EV. So I think there's quite a nice funnel there, and an indication that there is a potential for adoption.
Very interesting. So you got under 2% of own, but almost 70% are looking to own.
Exactly.
Very interesting indeed. So why is there such a big gap between this experience that we're seeing between ownership and this appetite in electric vehicles?
So the gap comes down to consumer perception, and how do consumers perceive the advantages first of all, and then disadvantages of EVs. And we teased out the data in those two ways. And let's go back one. Sorry, let's get the chart up.
So we've got a great chart there that we may just need to.
There we go. All right. So it's probably not a surprise that the green factors got first prize when it came to what consumers perceive as the advantages of EVs. But what I'd like to potentially highlight is the third or the second category, which is the lower running costs and maintenance costs, which we just heard from APSA a few minutes ago as well. And perhaps running costs or maintenance costs are underemphasized in the market.
Yeah, it's a really hard one to get your head around, and that's exactly why ABSA were presenting the total cost of ownership. So I guess there's a lot more to do on education, and you guys are obviously a perfect platform to do that because you've got all these in the market shoppers, car shoppers. So it does seem like consumers understand the green benefits. That's really cool. But what about the disadvantages? Do they understand what the main disadvantages may be?
Well, I think they understand the advantages more than they understand the disadvantages, because in the data that we got from the survey, South Africans perceive the disadvantages as being charging. And the disadvantages that consumers brought through in the survey were infrastructure charging and purchase cost. And we were saying that the purchase cost is the biggest barrier right now, and I suppose the quickest win in the market. And you spoke to me beforehand about lifestyle change.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it does seem like that South Africans are pretty much on the mark when it comes to advantages and disadvantages, but there is a lifestyle change that needs to happen. It's behavior change. And I do remember you mentioned to me something about horses.
Yeah, so I like to use an anecdotal story. Pre the ICE vehicle, people rode horses to get from point A to point B, and you would feed that horse at home. And it's almost like we're going back to that era where you charge your vehicle at home, and that's the essence of the lifestyle change. The fill up is not a destination fill up, and that's perhaps why consumers bring out the disadvantage of charging and the range anxiety, which we'll get to just now.
So if there's one lesson that everyone takes home today, it's that electric vehicles. Think back to when we used to have horses, and you would feed water and whatever else your horse during the evening and overnight, and they'd be raring to go the next day, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't, if you were planning a trip with your horse from Santon to Pretoria, you wouldn't wake up in the morning, not fed the horse and maybe not whatever else, and then plan to do that on the way. It would all be done before.
Exactly, and it could be quite expensive, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I suppose that gets us into consumer expectations, Ben. And what do South Africans expect from electric vehicles in order to buy one? Because it's one thing talking about all the electric vehicles and having an opinion, but the rubber hits the road when consumers have to pull out the money and actually buy an electric vehicle. And what we found was that 86% of survey respondents would use an EV as their primary vehicle, which I think is quite an important thing to in the consideration set, because you guys did the survey elsewhere as well, and I don't think it was as high as this.
No. So the people would normally choose an EV as their second car, especially in the Middle East, which I guess shows that, you know, this is people with a substantial amount of money that can have 2 or more cars.
Yeah, so primary vehicle use is important, and we looked at your last survey, and in the Middle East and Africa, 61% of consumers would use an EV as their primary vehicle. So South Africa, I think, has the appetite for this.
Absolutely. So some do say that in order to achieve mass adoption, you need to get the price right. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it is. It is right. Well, I know it is right because you know, at the end of the day, price is where the rubber hits the road, as I said, and initial EV cost and what consumers are willing to pay in South Africa drops off a cliff after 500,000 rand. So you can see in that chart that over 500,000 rand, 6, 7, 800,000 rand, the grayed out portions, the willingness to spend is incredibly low compared to 0 or 100,000 to 500,000 rand, and affordability seems to be the main reason that EV adoption could be slow in the future. If we don't sort that out, everything else is probably to naught. When the cheapest EV in South Africa today is 642,000 rand.
Yeah, yeah. So big difference, and it's interesting. You can just see as soon as you hit 600,000 on that graph, it just drops off the cliff.
Yeah.
So it really looks like it has to be this 500K or below for it to move. So I agree that upfront cost is one thing, but then there is the running cost, and we've heard about the total cost of ownership. But what did you actually find out there?
Yeah, so we only did calculations based on the fuel cost and charging cost of an EV, and in some instances, it's up to 7 times cheaper to run an EV from an electric charge point of view versus a fuel cost point of view, which is a big chunk of the cost of ownership of the day-to-day running of a consumer. So 7 times cheaper.
Wow. So it's inexpensive to run an EV in SA. That's important to know. But how do consumers see charging an EV?
So part of the survey included a question around home charging, and 90% of consumers believe that you can charge an EV in under 4 hours. But when asked whether they would buy one and what the expectations would be around charging, you can see that chart shifts to the left. Their perceptions of charging an EV is accurate,
Yeah.
but they want EVs to charge faster at home.
So it sounds like there's a bit of an educational gap there, along with this behavioral change around charging overnight.
Spot on, Ben. The big part of, I think, what South Africa needs to do is to market the right messages to get the consumers' lifestyle and behavior changes across the line, and then we surveyed public charging. As a question within the survey, and again, perceptions versus expectations. 74% of respondents believe that EVs fully charge in under 1 hour at public fast charging stations, but when it comes to buying intent, consumers want these public fast charging stations to charge the car within 30 minutes. Now, you know, a 0 to a full charge, that's, I think, a little bit unrealistic. So
Yeah.
again, it is a lifestyle educational piece.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's very rare that you need to do that 0 to 100%. Obviously, if you're driving to Durban or down to Cape Town, then you don't want to be stopping for too long. But on the whole, in your general lifestyle, you don't need to fast charge at an insane rate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't do more than about 30 to 40 kilometers on one trip, you know, to the office,
Yeah.
and then back. So a full charge is not necessary on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
And then we surveyed range. You know, there is this concept called range anxiety, and that consumers suffer from range anxiety when it comes to an EV. And 45% of respondents in the survey believe that an EV delivers up to 300 kilometers on a single charge. Again, when it comes to the buying intent or the purchasing intent, when they are deciding to buy one, they want more range. So not only do they want faster charging, they also want more range. And again, there is that lifestyle educational piece that I think is at play here.
Absolutely, and we keep mentioning this educational part, and I think this certainly bears that out. Home charging is an important factor when it comes to the average consumer. But as you were saying, I mean, even Pretoria to Sandton, I mean, is a 100-kilometer round trip, so it's very hard to do long distances unless you're planning to do a long distance road trip.
Yeah, I mean the only long distance trips really would be the holidays and December trips. So that brings us to the crux of the 3 pillars that we pulled out of the survey, and that is it's a little bit of a balancing act between engineering and marketing, and as you put it, lifestyle change and education, with home and public charging being at the top of consumers' minds when it comes to adoption of EVs. The initial cost, which is the upfront cost that needs to be addressed with government incentives and subsidies, and we know NAMSA is working on that. And then better range. They want better range. So while we know that batteries will get better and better and better, and range will get better and better and better, there is an equal amount of education needed around EVs in South Africa in order to create the adoption. But the elephant in the room, obviously, is cost.
Yeah, and it is good to hear, that NAMSA is working with the government on trying to get this tax, this import duty down. We saw a lot in the press recently. I know you've made some comments on that. So it sounds like that could be one golden bullet that would help just move things in the right direction.
If nothing else, I think it's the golden bullet. Next part of the survey is when consumers will buy EVs in South Africa.
And I'm sure there's a lot of OEMs and dealers that would like to know this.
Yeah, so this, I think, this next section is important for those OEMs and dealers, and how far into the future would they purchase? But before we get to the actual charts on OEMs and brands, it's interesting that in the survey, 18 to 34-year-olds say that they would buy an electric vehicle after 5 years.
Wow.
And 38% of respondents aged 35 to 54 are looking to buy an EV within the next 3 years. And over 55-year-olds are thinking about purchasing an EV within the next 3 years. So while the overall data points to EV adoption within the next 5 years, there are subcategories and demographics of consumers that I think need to be taken notice of.
Very interesting. I wouldn't have thought that it would be the older generation in many ways, but it shows that there obviously is a big difference there. So are car manufacturers aware of that? Are they missing a trick?
Some of them might be, Ben, and it could go down to purely aspirational audience versus disposable income audiences. We all know that we assume that younger people want to drive EVs. But the older generation, over 34-year-olds, have the disposable income to buy EVs, and we can see in the marketing of some EVs that they're marketing to the younger generation. I've in South Africa not been served with an EV ad.
Yeah.
And I'm 46. So
no way.
So there you can see I might not be targeted.
Yeah.
As an EV buyer. So that could be the trick. In the survey results show clearly that the older generation want to buy sooner.
I see what you mean, George. So you've got aspirational audience, you've got disposable income audience. That's a really interesting insight that I've pulled from this. I'd love to hear what the OEMs and dealers think about that, and whether in fact they will adapt or change their marketing based on these findings that you've pulled out. So what about awareness and trust? Are there brands within South Africa or anywhere that are perceived by the end users as either they know about them as having electric vehicles, or they would trust them to supply an electric vehicle?
This is a very interesting part, Ben, and the part that kind of put the smile on my face right at the beginning, besides the rest of the survey results, and that is awareness and trust. And you know, car buying perception and the brands around electric vehicles in line with the market, we know that BMW is the most searched for vehicle in South Africa. You know, on AutoTrader, we see it all the time. Can we just get that chart up there? There we go. We know that BMW is the most searched for vehicle on AutoTrader, and it's been like that for a long time. And
that being the i3, or just BMW in
well,
general?
just BMW as a brand.
Okay.
Okay. On AutoTrader, independent of that result.
Yeah.
But in the survey results, which brands have launched an EV in South Africa, BMW comes out tops as well.
Yeah.
So it's quite clear that BMW have a little bit of an advantage here in the minds of the consumer. You know, let's not discount the rest of the brands, because Mercedes-Benz is also up there. But it is interesting to see that that BMW has launched an EV and is the most searched for vehicle in South Africa.
Yeah.
What's on the juxtaposition, however, what's also interesting is that consumers perceive brands that haven't launched in South Africa as having launched in South Africa.
Yeah.
And that chart clearly shows that when we know that there are only a couple of EVs in the market at the moment, BMW, Jaguar I-Pace, Porsche, and the Mienie.
It's very
and the
interesting.
Nissan Leaf,
yeah.
but the Nissan Leaf is disappearing off showroom floors.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm really surprised to see that there are so many cars that haven't yet launched actually being perceived as being launched in South Africa.
Yeah, and then who would consumers trust to manufacture EVs, which I think is an important question to ask. And again, BMW came out on top as the most trusted brand to manufacture EVs in South Africa. But the most interesting nugget, I think, is that Tesla came second.
That is very interesting. A car manufacturer that doesn't even exist in South Africa or Africa, I think, is ranked so highly in this.
And doesn't even market in our market.
Yeah.
And I think to what Mike Mabasa was saying earlier on the previous panel, having spoken to Tesla about bringing Tesla to South Africa, and if we address the price and the incentive issue on the table, we could see adoption of Tesla quite quickly in South Africa.
And being a South African founded company, will it strike some chords, and will there be some loyalty purchases going on there as well?
It definitely would for me, and I'm sure for a lot of South Africans. And at Battery Day the other day, Elon Musk did say that they're looking at bringing out a $25,000 EV in the future. So you know, the stars may be aligned.
Wow, wow, very cool.
And you know, there's a lot more in the survey, Ben. Go to reports.autotrader.co.za to download the full survey and have a good read. But at the end of the day, I think it comes down to engineering versus marketing. Batteries will get more efficient, range will get better, but marketing and communication and lifestyle change, as you put it, is one of the most important things. And then the elephant in the room, government and tax.
Very interesting. George, thank you so much for analyzing the findings and just pulling out these really interesting insights. I can't believe there's actually more cool and interesting insights within the full report.
Definitely.
Very cool indeed. So I think now let's open up to some questions from the audience, if there are a few. I'm sure we've got some coming up, but what I would say, I know you've gone through the conclusion there, George, but what would be one of the main messages that you really want the audience to take away from this report?
I think the main message is, particularly to OEMs and manufacturers, is that you know, the consumers are ready to buy EVs. I think that's what the report mainly tells us, and they're ready to buy within the next 5 years. They're ready to buy cars under 500,000 rand. They want more range and more and faster charging, but that's more of a marketing communications challenge than it is changing the technology itself.
And those points just go completely against the grain of what we have been hearing in the market from business, government, key stakeholders, probably end users. We know that people like electric vehicles, but there's always been so much resistance when we talk about consumers actually being interested in these cars. But what this survey is showing, that consumers are ready. There's a price point they're willing to pay, which is under 500K. And most of them are looking at under 5 years, but some are actually looking at under 3 years.
3, exactly.
Very interesting indeed. So we've got a question here from Irma Venter, which is to you, George. George, what do you define as electric vehicle? Is it battery electric vehicle, plug-in hybrid vehicle, or both? Also, how big was the survey sample?
So the survey sample was over 3,000 consumers, which is very close to the international surveys that you've done before. So statistically, we think it's relevant. And then to define or to answer the first part of the question, which is what do I define as an EV? We posed the question as electric vehicle. So how the consumer interpreted that, I don't have an answer to, but in my mind, an electric vehicle is the ultimate utopia, which is battery electric.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Any other questions we've got for George there, or for me? Yeah, so electric vehicle, battery electric vehicle, plug-in hybrid vehicle. I guess it does cause some confusion in the market, but again, education and awareness would make that clearer. Have you done many reviews of plug-in hybrid or electric vehicles on AutoTrader?
Yes, we have. So if you go to the news and review section on autotrader.co.za, you'll find those. So all the vehicles that are currently in the market under those categories, we have driven and reviewed. You know, the feedback from the journalists when reviewing those cars is always around the exhilarating feeling of an electric vehicle. Even the BMW i3, which is the smallest of the lot.
Yeah. And have you got any journalists that are sort of real petrol heads in there?
Yes.
Even though they like it, they're scared to show their true emotions.
Yeah, you know, I mean, they're very outspoken, but some of the journalists, they mention things like, "Oh, electric vehicle doesn't have soul," but if you go and drive the Jaguar I-Pace and you put it in sport mode, you'll feel the soul.
Absolutely. And honestly, when I drove the BMW i3 from Pretoria down to Grafranet, hope I pronounced that well. I've been practicing.
You did.
Honestly, it was just a dream. Looking out around the scenic views and what South Africa has to show, I couldn't think of a better car to do it in. And I certainly couldn't think of doing the same experience in a petrol car, I have to say.
Yep, I agree.
We've got another question from Sia Dayali. Is the report available on the website?
Yes, it is. So if you go to reports.autotrader.co.za, you'll be able to download the full report, which has much more detail in it than what we unpacked today.
Brilliant. Another question we got from Samson Masabinu. Were the geographical location of the respondents specified?
So right at the beginning of the report, there is a demographic breakdown. As far as the numbers when it comes to how many in each province, I don't think so, but it was across the whole of South Africa.
Yeah, brilliant. So it's really South Africa focused survey. This is relevant for, firstly, South African stakeholders, but I think it also reflects some insights that the rest of Africa can take and apply into some of their thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think of South Africa as a gateway to Africa. So,
Yeah.
so the similar things could apply.
Brilliant. We've got one more question. I don't know how we're doing on time, so the team's going to have to let me know how many questions we're going to take. But Nayaga, as earlier mentioned, plug-in hybrid vehicles may address range anxiety issues. Are they counted as EVs?
In the survey, as I said earlier on, EVs were positioned as electric vehicles. So, you know, up to the consumer to decide whether plug-in hybrid electric vehicles are in the category of EVs. Personally, utopia is battery electric vehicle, which has no petrol or fossil fuel engine, because I think that's what the world is shooting for.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. George, I think that's probably all we've got time for in terms of the questions, but I know we've got one final segment of this very exciting session that we've already had. So I guess if the team can can help us out here, because what we're about to do is we're about to announce there was a winner. The people that filled in the survey, they were entered into a draw, and one person is lucky enough to win some tickets for the Electric Vehicle Road Trip Africa, which takes place in October next year. If anyone doesn't know what that is, we ran the first EVRT Africa in October last year. I can't believe it was 12 months ago. A 9-day electric vehicle road trip. It was from Pretoria to Cape Town. It may be the same route next year. Let's see. There's talk of Durban as well being included. But this is a fantastic way to experience electric vehicles. And one of your readers, one of your website visitors has been entered into the draw and has actually won this ticket. So
Lovely.
I think what we're going to do is we're going to go to a video that will explain a bit more about that. Wow, well done, Simpiwi. We'll be reaching out to you to tell you more about the EVRT Africa 2021 that we really look forward to doing next year. George, thank you so much. It's been really amazing working with your team on this. You guys know your stuff, and you know how to pull data apart.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate that. I must say, Generation E and the entire team. This has been and Smarter Mobility. This has been an amazing experience. You've taken what would have been, I suppose, a physical event and done this with it. I think it's awesome.
Thank you, fantastic. And this is just the beginning. We look forward to doing a lot more with AutoTrader.
Thank you.
Take care.